What an inspirational conversation I had with one of the most incredible women I've ever met. Sitting with Janis Kidder and learning about her life was inspiring, and it was fascinating to hear about her journey from small-town girl to rocket scientist.
I was born and raised out in Belglade here in Palm Beach County, and it was a very small town. Growing up in the 50s and the 60s, most of the area was cattle and crops. The sugarcane industry didn't get introduced until the 60s. So my father was a vet and worked large and small animals, as well as the first vet at Lion Country Safari. So that was kind of fun as a kid. As a teenager, I got to raise a couple of lion cubs for him, and that was kind of a fun thing to do. I think he wanted me to be a veterinarian, and it was fun raising the lion cubs, but no. My mom was a chemist and worked at the lab in the hospital, and I think she was pretty happy that I ended up doing a lot of work in chemistry. Although I didn't much care for chemistry, I think she was really good at it.
Janis knew that the life she wanted and needed for herself was outside of the rural agricultural and farming town, and knew that to find her place in this world, she had to aim for the stars.
I came out when I was a senior in high school, so I had that relationship start at such a young age for me that it really gave me a sense of the ability to be open, at least with my own self. But we weren't open in Belglade. Belglade was a very small town to be a lesbian. So my issue was to get out of Belglade and not come back. My coming out experience at 18 was, for me, fabulous, in that the woman was just a few years older than me. And because I grew up in so much silence in my family, it wasn't anything I was going to talk about. And I'm always kind of laughing that we didn't talk about anything, so why would I talk about that? But to be able to have the opportunity to have that experience meant that I didn't have to face what was going to happen to try to work my way through the straight world and get back into being a lesbian. Growing up in Belglade, I was a bit of a tomboy. I was out with my dad, working cows or going to Lion Country, wearing jeans and t-shirts or whatever growing up. So it didn't seem that illogical to be a lesbian now that I look at it. But I didn't understand that I had options until after that. So I could go ahead and not worry about the men and just move on into the life that I thought I wanted to have as a lesbian and for the rest of my life.
Incredibly, Janis found her career working in the space industry, just as NASA was transitioning into the new and groundbreaking space shuttle program. Janis not only helped create important components to help the shuttle fly, but witnessed both the triumphs and tragedies of launching a spacecraft whose return to Earth functioned like an airplane. She loved her work, but also faced a reckoning of what it meant to be a lesbian in the cisgender male-dominated field of rocket science and engineering.
As much as I enjoyed the work and a lot of the people, I was faced with a lot of sexual harassment in that department. And in 1980, which is when I started at Martin Marietta, sexual harassment was really a problem. And if I had reported that to management or to HR, I might have been able to get the guy's job, get him fired, but I would have been labeled the bad guy. And people would perceive me as I asked for it or I was set up, rather than this guy was really inappropriate with me day after day after day. So I put in for a transfer to systems engineering and started working what we called mission support to support the launch process of the external tank space shuttle. Starting in 1980 meant that I was around for the very first launch in 1981 in the fall. And that was pretty spectacular to be there for that. And I was around some really wonderful men and women who were older than me that really knew the program and really understood the details of what we were doing. I felt like I was trying to play catch up a lot of the time because of how much they knew and how quick they could make decisions. I was around for both the Challenger accident in '86 and worked on the investigation with that. The day that it happened, I was standing out in the hallway with my colleagues, watching a TV monitor, and all of us got really quiet, and we could hear the test conductor say, "There's been a major malfunction." And all of us were just in shock. We didn't know what to do. And of course, the external tank was initially blamed for the accident. So they took my team, where we were working flight certification at that point, under management, and we started building presentations just to understand what happened and how the external tank was not the cause. And as we know, we weren't the cause in the end. It was one of the solid rocket boosters. At the same time, it forced the whole program to step back, and it took us 3 years to return to flight. And we did a complete recertification of the tank. Every requirement, every piece of hardware down to the rivet. It was an incredible experience to go through, and to be part of that team is something I'm pretty proud of. The Columbia accident happened in 2003, and the biggest difference between those two was that we now had laptops. In 1986, desktop computers didn't exist for us. People were at the sites of the launch, like at Kennedy Space Center at Huntsville or Houston. By 2003, we had created a room where everybody could be together. And we all knew that we lost a chunk of foam that day, and we all knew it came from our tank, and we all knew that it hit the orbiter. The question was, how bad did it hit it, and how much damage was caused? And as we know, the return that Saturday morning was catastrophic. And it put all of us right back in that same mode of shock. How fast can we work? How fast can we find answers? What can we do to mitigate any of that and return to flight? Because we had people in space station by then, and we had to get things back to them. We relied on the Russian spacecraft, but we needed to get our program back up and running. Personally, when we returned to flight in 1989 after the Challenger accident, I sat at my desk and listened on a radio for the launch. I did not want to experience it again. I knew I couldn't face it. So I sat at my desk with the radio on. I actually was sitting there crying, trying to figure out how I was going to face this if something happened. So between 1989 and 2001, I didn't watch any launches. And I was encouraged by my wife to pay attention and get back with my team and be with my people for the launch. I guess in between those two things, between the Challenger and the Columbia, I got assigned to a couple of teams doing some very specific things. One was we were redesigning the external tank to save 8,000 pounds. And that 8,000 pounds meant the orbiter could carry more weight in the payload bay. And that meant they could take hardware into space to build the space station. And that's what that was all about. So that was interesting, and I think it was fun. I mean, I think I've had some really interesting experiences and a lot of fun doing what we did. I was also part of a team where we were trying to identify just how small a piece of foam could come off the tank and not do damage. And that was based on fixing the tiles on the bottom of the orbiter. It had nothing to do with actually what happened.
Janis also made a deep impact on her fellow employees at Lockheed Martin by working as part of a small team of cohorts to fight for equal benefits at her workplace, improving the quality of life for LGBTQ employees and their families. Janis was selfless in her determination to help create change from within her company, inspiring transformation of outdated restrictions and prejudices to well-deserved rights.
Martin Marietta and Lockheed merged in 1985. 1995, sorry. And in 1995, they put out this newsletter. And in the newsletter, they featured a woman that was an open lesbian from Sunnyvale, California. And she had been part of the Lockheed side of the merger. So I contacted her, trying to ask the questions about domestic partner benefits. And she worked out there as a manager. She had a man that was a gay man there at Sunnyvale. I was the only person from New Orleans who would even think about this. Everybody else stayed in the closet, told me to be quiet, all that. As it turned out, there were 7 of us that were willing to press the issue to get domestic partner benefits at Lockheed Martin. And it took us until 2001 to do it. But we find the 7 of us finally convinced the corporate management structure in Bethesda, Maryland, to offer these benefits to us, that we demonstrated the cost effectiveness between the two and to get it done. And we did it. It was pretty incredible. It felt like a big achievement.
I am in awe of Janis's incredible talent and the expertise that she brought to serving our nation's aerospace program. But one of the most interesting components of Janis's life was her annual trip to attend and work at MishFest in rural Michigan. It was fascinating to learn how Janis found her community and found strength in learning her voice was strong and valid.
Well, MishFest was one of those things that when you first get started, you don't realize what an impact it's going to have. So my first fest was in 1981. I was 29 years old. And I arrived at the fest and I was in shock at the amount of women that were there. Thousands of women were there, and women from all races, all walks of life, all cultures, all ages. It was just a phenomenal experience. And as I started working there in 85 and worked to the end in 2014, that it was like having a small town right there. The infrastructure was all established. We had transportation and shuttles. We had parking. The stages were set up to run in series. So we had women who were doing the sound and the lighting. I ran the box office for them for 20 years. I took that also as a way that I would go to Michigan in a space that was all women, mostly lesbians. And I could network with other women from around the world and how they operate in the world and have discussions with them. And then I'd go back out into my community in New Orleans and I could go back to my workforce and I would feel stronger to be able to face the world that I had to face and face the decisions that I needed to make with a different kind of strength.
MishFest was important because it's also where Janis met the love of her life, Tony Armstrong Jr., in 2001. They were first married in Canada, and together they are an incredibly accomplished couple whose individual successes inspire us to do more to help our fellow women see their power and worth as strong-out women.
We got married in 2005, and we decided to, once we got engaged, to get married first because our moms were getting older and we were nervous that they wouldn't be able to travel. And we chose to go to Canada because Canada had legalized marriage equality, and it was not anywhere close in the United States. So if we went to Canada to get married, we felt like the United States was not going to not recognize our marriage certificate. So we went off with our moms, just the 4 of us, and had a very small, intimate ceremony. We got married there in Canada.
Janis returned to Palm Beach County with Tony in 2006, transferring with Lockheed Martin to work on undersea robotics. It also gave her an opportunity to care for her beloved mother and Tony's mother. Janis is also active in GLAST, and I couldn't help but think that Janis and Tony helped create a community of like-minded, active women here in Palm Beach County, similar to the active and inspiring summer community that they discovered at MishFest.
GLAST was founded by my wife, Tony Armstrong Jr., and it stands for Bi, Lesbian, and Straight Together Women of the Palm Beaches. So it's by, for, and about women. And today we have over 4,000 members, and it's a meetup type site. So we have over 4,000 members, and on average we're doing like 200 events a year. And those events might include bike riding or going to the beach, going snorkeling. book clubs, discussion groups, pagan circles. We're doing pickleball. There's a lot of parks out on the western part of the county where there's some boardwalks for bird watchers and stuff like that. So all these are events that are created by our own members. So if any one member wants to have something, they could say they want to do this, and they want to this is the description, and this is where they want to do it. So it happens. Like I'm part of a little poker group, so we get together, play poker, learn the strategy and stuff like that.
Janis carries her passions with her completely, and it was interesting to hear her say she thinks of herself as introverted. She is an avid traveler, and it's remarkable that someone who worked so tirelessly to keep the human race traveling to space is now actively exploring the far reaches of this planet, including trips to the Arctic Circle and the equator. Janis is also an avid cyclist, pedaling 17 to 20 miles a day, continually challenging herself and finding an outlet through the difficulties and constraints of this ongoing pandemic. With her example of advocacy and continuous fight for equality, I asked Janis what she thinks my generation should focus on moving forward, and how we can further the work she and her generation helped create for us.
I think the biggest thing right now is to fight this right-wing political regime that's going on, and be sure that the laws that have been implemented over the last 50 or so years don't get rolled back. For both lesbians, gays, the trans community, there's a lot going on that's going to be really, really tough for all of us if these laws get rolled back. And that's makes me nervous that not enough are out advocating to keep our laws in place. I think also that I'd like to see a little bit more respect among all of us in our age groups and our decisions that we make of how we want to be in the world, and give each other a little bit more room to operate with a lot more respect with one another and the decisions that we make. And it doesn't mean any one of us is wrong or right, and we don't have to do that. I think that what we had to do is find win-win so that we can be in community together. I think that's where things like coalitions come into play, that if any of us are in coalition, we have one mission, and we might not agree on everything, but a coalition is one mission that we agree on this, whatever it is, and that all the other disagreements might be outside the scope of that, and we're not addressing those. We're just dealing with the one thing that we're in coalition with. And there's a lot of ways to make that work. I think it's important also to remember that the system expects us to fight, expects the infighting. And while we're doing this infighting stuff, other things are happening that will affect us adversely. The laws are going to be changed while we're busy having these struggles. So we need to find a way to work together to combat this right-wing kind of ideology that's going on in today's politics. The biggest thing right now is vote. You and your friends, get your friends to go out and vote locally in the elections, the state level and the national level. I think a lot of times that there's so much emphasis every 4 years on the presidential election. But in between all that, there's a lot of elections that affect us at the local level, day in and day out at the state level. So I think voting is probably one of the biggest things, and to get our friends registered and get them out there and make them vote.
I hear you, Janis. I know it's important for my generation to not only commit to fighting for equality, but also listen to your generation and understand your experiences and how they deeply impact us today. I asked Janis what she thought about my generation, and I'm truly honored by her response.
The biggest thing is that you all seem like to be big advocates, and that it's like to pursue whatever it is and pick up the pieces of what our generation has done. Sometimes I think of it as an elder person, I can give you the wheel that we made, so that you don't have to go off and reinvent the wheel, but you're going to take the wheel and understand what we've done, modify it, and make it better for you and the next generation. So you seem like fierce advocates to work with a lot of the work that we've done as older people who have been through some of the obstacles. And we're not going to solve all the obstacles, but if we can give you a better wheel to work with, you won't have to go off and reinvent a new one.
Finally, as a person who made a deep impact on me, I asked Janis what she thought about Compass and its impact on our community.
I think that Compass is important. There needs to be a place for the LGBT community to come and be and feel safe. This is something that sort of fits back into that Michigan thing that I was saying, feeling safe so that you can feel empowered, so that you can go off and do the work that you want to do and be who you want to be in the world. And I think Compass provides that to the young people today.
What Janis has done for this country and for our community is extremely important and inspiring. From a young woman, Belle Glade, to helping us explore the universe beyond the limit of our planet is incredibly moving. She even helped engineer a ship. Janis is a fierce advocate for the girls and women everywhere who need a voice to help them grow and recognize their power within. Her speaking voice may be quiet and thoughtful, but the weight of her voice can be heard up in space. Thank you, Janis, for your inspiration and for sharing with me your kindness.